And at number 10, we unravel the sophisticated ghost plot that was initially framed as a simple identity fraud case, but was ultimately revealed as a cold-blooded self-deployment scheme, a calculated invasion that utilized over 20 aliases and stole from the most vulnerable among us. Stay tuned, because the true genius of the ringleader was not just her ability to lie, but her ability to impersonate an entire administrative office. Number 10. Shannon Nicole Womack, the Ghost Nurse Operation. The date: actively operating from 2020, with final arrests in April 2025. The target: vulnerable residents and patients across multiple nursing homes. The conspirator: Shannon Nicole Womack, 39, a serial fake LPN RN. The location: multi-state, culminating in Western Pennsylvania. The healthcare staffing crisis has been painted as the beating heart of modern American medicine struggle. The desperation for warm bodies, particularly in long-term care facilities, created a massive, system-wide vulnerability. But in this void of overworked, understaffed institutions, one woman saw not a crisis, but an opportunity, a blank canvas upon which to paint a masterpiece of calculated systemic deception. Shannon Nicole Womack appeared to be the answer to every facility's prayer, an experienced professional nurse ready to deploy immediately. She wasn't an employee of a traditional agency, but of a firm she called her own, presenting the perfect image of a self-sufficient, highly qualified contractor. But beneath the veneer of professionalism and the perfectly crafted resume, the air was not one of critical care. It was suffocating, heavy with the corrosive acid of stolen identities and decades of unaddressed addiction. This was a house of cards built on lies, where every syringe drawn was potentially a theft. The facade was impeccable, but the reality, as later investigations would reveal, was a private, terrifying nightmare for the 9 different facilities Womack worked at across Western Pennsylvania alone between October 2024 and April 2025. She was not just a fake nurse, she was a one-woman criminal enterprise. Official reports from the Pennsylvania State Police investigation, later scrutinized by journalists, painted a picture of systematic psychological warfare against the very system designed to vet professionals. Womack allegedly stole credentials from 4 real, licensed nurses from southern states. A tactical ruse, securing names from a geography far removed from her operational area. She didn't just assume an identity, she assumed 20-plus aliases, including Angel Renee Kelly, Shannon Nicole Lawson, and Shannon Nicole Abiola, weaving a constantly shifting web of deceit. The plot itself was not a spontaneous eruption of need, but a chilling piece of logistical planning that defied the profile of a typical drug abuser. It was a systematic, self-deployment execution designed to secure 2 things: unchecked access to vulnerable patients' medications and the ability to operate under zero scrutiny. She actually created her own fake staffing agency, LLC. This inherent duality, the act of desperate theft masked as legitimate business acquisition, is what kept the narrative perpetually unresolved for months. The plan, as later detailed in the charging documents, hinged on complete administrative control. When a nursing facility called her agency to vet her credentials, Womack would answer the phone herself using a different voice, playing the role of her own administrative secretary. She created a phantom network to vouch for the ghost nurse. She used 7 different social security numbers and multiple IDs. This terrifying capacity for foresight and premeditation allowed her to infiltrate critical care settings like the Greenery Center for Rehab and Nursing and St. Mary's Home of Erie. The true toll of the attack, the theft of over 120 doses of medication, including potent opioids like oxycodone, from the most vulnerable residents, was intended to send a message that the system was fundamentally broken. This was not the work of a professional nurse. It suggested an emotional, deeply personal act of drug abuse disguised by professional tools, a final, violent attempt to obliterate the source of her own withdrawal. The immediate aftermath was an exercise in performance art until the curtain finally fell. The true unraveling of the Womack narrative did not come from forensic evidence within a nursing home, but from the most mundane encounters, a routine traffic stop in Cecil Township, Pennsylvania on April 5, 2025. When Womack gave police false identification, the small thread of her massive deception finally snagged. The search of her vehicle revealed the sheer scale of her operation. Multiple forms of ID, patient logs, medical records, and the smoking gun. Prescription medications belonging to facility residents, and nursing equipment from different healthcare roles. Here lies the crucial, almost impossible curiosity gap that kept investigators glued to the story. How could one woman, wanted in Georgia, Tennessee, New Jersey, and Indiana for similar offenses, successfully deploy into 9 different Western Pennsylvania facilities without immediate detection? The wall of secrecy was built by the institutional failure to cross-check credentials across state lines or even against internal do not retain lists. When the Pennsylvania State Police announced the extensive 43-count charges on July 21, 2025, the illusion shattered. Womack was arraigned with bond set at a substantial $250,000, immediately denied due to her extreme flight risk. The subsequent legal battles will be a masterclass in accountability. The prosecution will argue systemic fraud fueled by addiction. They will present evidence of the danger she placed patients in by diverting their necessary pain medication. Their argument is sharp. This was a premeditated, massive campaign of identity theft committed by a predator seeking to profit off the sick. Yet, the story is defined by its refusal to die. The Womack saga is a profound study in the ambiguity of trust. Did a desperate individual break the law for drugs and money? Yes. But did the profound, fractured nature of the modern healthcare system create the perfect multi-state launching pad for her evil? The question keeps the loop perpetually open, reminding us that the most dangerous war zone of all is the one where we are forced to be dependent on strangers. Shannon Nicole Womack successfully exploited the system's need, but at the ultimate cost to patient safety. Her struggle revealed a deep institutional wound, the inability to see past a credential to recognize true danger. But this kind of hidden tyranny, where power abusers hide in plain sight, is not unique to identity thieves. Our next case explores a suburban nurse who used her white coat not for fraud, but for pure, calculated elimination, involving 17 confirmed victims. The discovery of her pattern was a miracle, a desperate intervention before her body count became truly catastrophic. Where in the world are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments. Then stay with us as we uncover the nightmare of Heather Pressdee, a serial killer nurse who used the ultimate healing drug, insulin, as her silent lethal weapon. The sheer duration of her operation tests the very limits of human trust. Number 9. Heather Pressdee, the Angel of Death's shift change. The date: murder spanning 2020 to 2023. Sentencing May 2024. The target: 22 total victims, resulting in 17 patient deaths. The conspirator: Heather Irene Pressdee, 41, a registered nurse. The location: 5 long-term care facilities in Western Pennsylvania. The story of Heather Pressdee is not one of a quick, violent explosion like a domestic tragedy, but a slow-burn horror built on the gradual, calculated elimination of life. It is a narrative built upon the absolute corruption of the Hippocratic Oath, a sustained campaign of lethal injection waged by one person against her own patients. This case bypassed the sensational headlines of fraud and focused instead on the primal shock of a serial killer operating with a syringe in her hand. It was a domestic terror that lasted for years, hidden in plain sight by the very authority of her position, a structure engineered for absolute secrecy. Pressdee presented the image of a functional registered nurse, moving from facility to facility. Yet in the span of 5 years, she worked at 11 different medical sites, resigning or being fired from all of them amid complaints of abusive behavior. Neighbors and colleagues might have seen her as perhaps eccentric, but ultimately functional. This immediately sets up our first psychological angle, the institutional failure critique. How could so many adults, shift supervisors, HR departments, and facility managers across multiple nursing homes fail to see what was unfolding behind the locked doors of the medication room? These facilities placed her on internal do not retain lists, but critically, never reported her to authorities, allowing her to simply change uniforms and start killing again. The murders began subtly, but escalated ruthlessly. The details unearthed by law enforcement were almost beyond comprehension, forming the core conflict that drove the investigation. The execution was systematic. Pressdee would intentionally give lethal or potentially lethal doses of insulin to patients who often didn't even require the drug. The weapon was invisible, often leading to a diagnosis of an unrelated sudden medical event. The victims, including 55-year-old James Bartow and 83-year-old Joseph Campbell, represented the most vulnerable members of society. The core of her malice and the central open loop for the prosecution was her strategic planning. Pressdee would often ensure her victims would expire prior to a shift change. Why? So the death would not occur on her watch and the patient would not be sent to a hospital where medical testing, such as a C-peptide test, could discover
the highly unusual and lethal dose of insulin she administered. This transforms the nurse from a mere murderer into a meticulous predator, meticulously controlling the forensic window of her crime. The crucial turning point in this family's story, however, wasn't a confession. It was a desperate, horrified alarm raised by a more attentive medical professional. The sheer pattern, 17 deaths and 22 total victims injected, became statistically impossible to ignore. Pressdee was finally arrested in May 2023. When Pressdee was apprehended, her actions revealed a profound negativity bias towards her victims. She saw them not as people, but as obstacles or subjects for her twisted sense of control. Before becoming a nurse, she had worked as a veterinary technician, a dark parallel that led investigators to believe she may have experimented with euthanizing animals before moving to humans. The legal fallout was swift and definitive. Pressdee pleaded guilty on May 2, 2024, to 3 counts of first-degree murder and 19 counts of attempted murder, accepting the overwhelming evidence and the impossibility of a defense. The eventual legal outcome, 3 consecutive life sentences plus 380 to 760 years, avoided a full trial but still spelled out a total annihilation of her freedom. The court acknowledged the pure evil in her motivation. The aftermath for the victims' families was one of searing rage. Melinda Brown, sister of victim Nicholas Symbol, stated simply, "She's pure evil. There's no justice for this." Elizabeth Simons Ozella, the daughter of Irene Simons, encapsulated the betrayal, where angry and hurt that she disguised herself as a caring nurse. She took someone from this earth that she had no right to take. The Pressdee case serves as a profound study in the absolute power dynamic within a healthcare facility when institutional checks fail. It reminds us that the most frightening prisons are often the ones built by the hands of those meant to heal us, using the very tools of medicine to silence the innocent. Her comparison to Charles Cullen, the good nurse, who also killed dozens in Pennsylvania using insulin, serves as a chilling testament to the systemic danger. Pressdee was denied freedom because she weaponized the sacred tools of her trade. But not all acts of betrayal are for death. Sometimes the destruction is purely financial, involving a scale so vast it collapses the very notion of local crime. Our next case explores a single nurse practitioner in Florida who, operating under the veil of telehealth, trafficked enough stimulant pills to affect the entire nation. This plot was hidden, not under a pillow, but behind the veneer of digital healthcare. Next, we expose the chilling reality of Erin Kim, the woman who prescribed 1.5 million Adderall pills to strangers for cash. Number 8. Erin Kim, the digital pill mill. The date, until 2024. Arrest/charged. The target, patients nationwide, particularly those seeking stimulants. The conspirator, Erin Kim, 54, a nurse practitioner. The location, Orlando, Florida, /nationwide via telehealth, Done Global Inc. The case of Erin Kim is a searing indictment of authority bias in the modern, digital landscape of medicine. She presented herself as a licensed nurse practitioner capable of providing crucial attention deficit care via a digital health platform called Done Global Inc. Her life was a meticulously curated performance of remote efficiency and professional competence. The betrayal, therefore, was not just against her patients, but against the entire regulatory framework that assumes a minimum standard of care. Her digital facade was the ultimate weapon, ensuring no one would look too closely at her auto-refill policy. The crime itself was a systematic, massive-scale distribution operation disguised as routine medical care. Kim prescribed over 1.5 million pills of Adderall and other stimulants to patients across the country. She was paid over $800,000 by Done for these high-volume, low-effort prescriptions. This initial claim of high-volume care was a calculated effort to direct police attention away from the glaring lack of patient interaction, reinforcing her role as a high-value contractor. But the conflict emerged almost immediately in the investigation's chilling evidence and the pure volume of her prescriptions. The true engine of this tragedy was not a random technological glitch, but a classic motive cloaked in digital convenience, profit facilitation through the exploitation of addiction. Detectives soon uncovered that she was prescribing these controlled substances without any audio or visual interaction after the initial encounter, pursuant to Done's auto-refill policy. The sheer ease of the process created an overwhelming impetus for elimination of care standards. Her digital persona as a modern health facilitator provided the perfect negativity bias shield. It was simply unthinkable that a medical professional, operating within a seemingly legitimate tech company, could be capable of such calculated endangerment. The transformation from digital clinician to prime suspect was swift, driven by fatal outcomes. Investigators charged Kim for continuing to issue Adderall prescriptions for months after the overdose deaths of her patients. She was also prescribing stimulants to individuals suffering from drug addiction. Furthermore, she and others allegedly fabricated patient files and signed prescriptions for individuals who did not meet the requisite diagnostic criteria for ADHD, pushing dosages that went beyond accepted medical standards. Erin Kim faces federal charges of conspiracy and distribution of controlled substances, prosecuted by the National Rapid Response Strike Force. The trial will be a battle between two narratives: the defense's argument of a high-volume modern medical practice versus the prosecution's damning evidence of a digital pill mill. The fallout was a profound crisis of faith and trust within the burgeoning telehealth industry. A nurse practitioner entrusted with the responsibility of managing one of the most highly addictive classes of drugs had become the ultimate trafficker. This case serves as a stark lesson on authority bias. When respect for an individual's title and the convenience of a tech platform supersede critical objective examination of patient files, absolute systemic danger can take root and flourish. Erin Kim's digital mask fell away, revealing the rot beneath her professional attire. But not all betrayals are for high-volume prescription fees. Sometimes the betrayal is to erase a devastating financial debt through phantom billing a child deemed inconvenient to a future narrative. Our next story involves a nurse practitioner who inflated a simple vitamin B shot into a $62 million fraud. This crime shocked the insurance industry and forced a permanent change in how simple preventative care is billed. Next, we expose the chilling reality of Tristan Svejkovsky, the Montana NP who became a millionaire on fake B12 injections. Number 7. Tristan Ashley Svejkovsky, the $62 million vitamin swindle. The date: operating until April 2022, sentenced to 5 years. The target: Blue Cross Blue Shield of Montana and the federal healthcare system. The conspirator: Tristan Ashley Svejkovsky, 41, a nurse practitioner. The location: Butte, Montana. The story of Tristan Ashley Svejkovsky is not about physical violence or the subtle horror of lethal drugs. It is a brazen tale of financial gluttony, utilizing the sheer complexity of medical billing codes to steal from the system. This narrative unfolds not in a darkened hospital room, but in the dry, technical labyrinth of CPT codes and unit counts. Svejkovsky weaponized the authority bias of the insurance provider, counting on the fact that automated systems and busy claims processors would never scrutinize a claim for a substance as benign as vitamin B12. The official image Svejkovsky projected was that of a dedicated nurse practitioner in Butte, Montana, providing essential care. The true conflict, however, was Svejkovsky's insatiable financial greed, seeking to erase the burden of normal life by manufacturing wealth. The core of Svejkovsky's plot was phantom billing, submitting claims for vitamin B12 injections that were never actually administered to patients. Initially, she billed for 1 unit per injection, a common practice valued at $4.88. This established a pattern of believable low-risk claims. The fatal transformation began when Svejkovsky decided to massively escalate the fraud. Instead of billing for 1 unit, she began inflating the unit count to 1,000. This single
alteration caused the claim value to skyrocket from $4.88 to a staggering $4,880 per injection. This maneuver, repeated hundreds of times, created a total intended fraud loss of over $62.3 million billed to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Montana. This is the ultimate commodification of care, turning a simple vitamin shot into a multi-million-dollar transaction. The scheme worked for a time, with Svejkovsky successfully getting $613,108 paid out before the sheer, inexplicable volume of B12 units triggered an alarm in the insurance system. The investigation revealed Svejkovsky's total disregard for the law even after her license was suspended on April 1, 2022. She continued to prescribe controlled substances for months, and after surrendering her DEA registration, she used a friend's DEA number without permission to write at least 28 more prescriptions. This demonstrated a terrifying lack of remorse and an assumption that her authority was absolute even when stripped of her license. Svejkovsky was ultimately convicted and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. The Svejkovsky case serves as a critical study of how financial desperation can pervert a medical practice into a mechanism of outright theft, exploiting the blind faith placed in official documentation. It forced the healthcare system to confront the fact that even the most mundane of medical procedures can be weaponized for massive personal gain. Svejkovsky stole millions by inflating a simple injection. But sometimes the scale of the financial betrayal is not about one practitioner. It involves a network of hundreds of licensed professionals across the entire country, operating a multi-billion-dollar kickback and unnecessary procedure scheme. Our next case involves the largest healthcare fraud takedown in U.S. history, a systemic betrayal that involved medical staff and pharmacists turning medically required products into a profit machine. Next, we expose the chilling reality of the $14.6 billion DOJ takedown. Number 6. The $14.6 billion DOJ takedown, the kickback machine. The date, announced June 30, 2025. The target, Medicare and federal health programs. The The conspirators, 324 defendants, including 96 licensed medical professionals, nurse practitioners, doctors, pharmacists. The location, nationwide. The Department of Justice's June 2025 announcement was not just a news story, it was a devastating portrait of systemic corruption at the highest level of the medical community. This takedown, involving hundreds of arrests, exposed a network of medical professionals who treated the federal healthcare system not as a social safety net, but as an endless ATM. The scope of the intended loss, over $14.6 billion, is a number so large it's almost impossible to comprehend, illustrating a colossal institutional failure of ethics. This is the ultimate betrayal of scale, where the authority bias of the licensed professional was utilized to defraud the federal government on an industrial level. The conflict was not singular. It was a pervasive battle between the oath to heal and the greed of the kickback economy. The core of this massive conspiracy often revolved around illegal kickbacks for products and services, particularly expensive allografts or skin substitutes used in wound care. The professionals involved, doctors, pharmacists, and crucially, nurse practitioners, were essentially paid referral fees to push procedures regardless of medical necessity. Two notable nurse practitioners in Nevada exemplify this toxic partnership. Angela Gonzalez, a registered nurse who received approximately $7.4 million in illegal kickbacks from allograft distributors. She applied these allografts, often medically unnecessary, to Medicare beneficiaries. Her company billed Medicare over $94 million based on these false claims. Mary Huntley, a 67-year-old nurse practitioner who fraudulently billed Medicare approximately $14.3 million for applying medically unnecessary allografts procured through illegal kickbacks. The method was simple: grease the wheels of the medical referral system. Providers were paid handsomely to apply products, generating enormous fraudulent claims. This activity leveraged negativity bias, the assumption that since multiple licensed practitioners were signing off on the necessity of a wound care procedure, it must be legitimate, thereby diverting any critical scrutiny. The scale of the takedown was overwhelming, resulting in the seizure of over $245 million in cash, luxury vehicles, cryptocurrency, and other assets. The crimes were not about sustaining a drug habit. They were about achieving obscene wealth through professional treachery. The fallout is a profound crisis of trust in the integrity of essential medical services. Every procedure, every referral is now viewed through the cynical lens of potential kickbacks. This case serves as a critical lesson. When licensed authority is leveraged purely for financial gain, the cost to the public is measured in the billions, and the victims are all taxpayers who rely on a functional medical healthcare system. The DOJ takedown proved that healthcare greed is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. But not all systemic fraud requires a network. Sometimes the sheer volume of pills prescribed by a single determined nurse practitioner can fuel the fire of the opioid crisis on its own. Our next subject involves a New York NP who issued hundreds of unlawful prescriptions for opioids and benzodiazepines, turning the sanctity of her practice into a major trafficking operation. Next, we expose the chilling history of Lauren Simonson, the woman who took cash concealed in DVD cases in exchange for a continuous supply of highly addictive drugs. Number 5. Lauren Simonson, the opioid mail drop. The date, January 2020 through October 2022. Sentenced March 2024. The target, 54 patients and the general community of Suffolk County, New York. The conspirator, Lauren Simonson, a nurse practitioner. The location, New York, serving Suffolk County patients. The story of Lauren Simonson is one of pure, calculated opioid trafficking, thinly veiled beneath the pretense of a professional practice. In a region already struggling with the devastating effects of the addiction epidemic, Simonson decided to actively profit from the tragedy, transforming her clinic into a high-volume source for illegal drugs. The official story was that Simonson was managing chronic pain and anxiety for her patients. The reality was a systematic betrayal of trust spanning nearly 3 years. The core conflict was the blatant exchange of power for profit. Simonson unlawfully prescribed controlled substances to 54 patients, issuing hundreds of prescriptions for high-risk drugs, including hydrocodone, oxycodone, clonazepam, and Adderall. The most shocking detail, which drove the investigation, was the sheer criminality of the transaction. In one specific example, Simonson issued 63 oxycodone prescriptions to 2 Suffolk County residents who had no medical condition requiring the drug. The payment method was not a standard copay. The residents would pay by mailing packages of cash concealed in DVD cases. This bizarre, secretive ritual underscored the criminal nature of the relationship. The transformation from clinician to convicted criminal was confirmed in March 2024 when Simonson was sentenced to 70 months, nearly 6 years in federal prison, along with a $10,000 fine. The fallout was a powerful reminder that the opioid crisis is not just fueled by pharmaceutical companies, but by the direct, intentional corruption of licensed individuals. Simonson's case ensures that the community will view every pain prescription with suspicion, proving that the white coat is now, sadly, a documented instrument of trafficking. Simonson received cash in DVD cases for feeding the opioid crisis. But sometimes the transaction is even more degrading, exchanging powerful, addictive drugs for sexual favors. Our next case, part of a massive Appalachian takedown, involves a male nurse practitioner who brazenly branded himself the Rock Doc while running a sex-for-pills scheme. This case exposes the vile intersection of medical authority and sexual exploitation.
Number 4. The Rock Doc Con. Sex for Pills. The date, charged as part of a multi-state federal takedown. The target, vulnerable patients seeking opioid and benzodiazepine prescriptions. The conspirator, a male nurse practitioner branded the Rock Doc. The location, Tennessee, Appalachian Regional Prescription Opioid Strike Force Region. This case, though lacking a specific public name due to the larger federal operation, perfectly encapsulates the dark, exploitative side of the opioid epidemic, fueled by medical professionals. The Rock Doc used his title and access to powerful narcotics not just for financial gain, but to satisfy a predatory sexual agenda. This is the ultimate, vile abuse of the authority bias. Patients, desperate for pain relief, were coerced into non-consensual acts by the very person sworn to treat them. The Rock Doc brazenly marketed himself, utilizing a catchy, unprofessional brand that should have immediately raised red flags. The core conflict was the trading of necessary medical care for sexual exploitation. The Rock Doc allegedly prescribed powerful and dangerous combinations of opioids and benzodiazepines, sometimes in direct exchange for sexual favors. This nurse practitioner was caught in the net of the Appalachian Regional Prescription Opioid Strike Force, a multi-state operation that charged dozens of medical professionals. The authorities recognized that the corruption was endemic, charging 31 physicians, 8 nurse practitioners, and 7 pharmacists across 10 federal districts. The problem was systemic, built on the assumption that the victims would be too afraid or too dependent to report the abuse. The fallout from the Rock Doc case is one of moral devastation. It forced a public confrontation with the reality that some medical professionals in the crisis zone were operating as opportunistic sexual predators, using the addiction of their patients as a form of payment.
The Zeigarnik loop here is the ongoing federal prosecution, where the public is waiting to see the final tally of victims and the severity of the sentence for this profound violation of power. The rock doc traded drugs for favors, but sometimes the damage is simply done through sheer mind-boggling volume. Our next subject involves another Tennessee nurse practitioner who flooded the community with over 1.1 million pills in just 3 years. A one-person prescription mill operating in the heart of the opioid epidemic. Next, we look at the frightening reality of the high-volume Tennessee NP. Number 3. High-volume Tennessee NP, the million-pill pipeline. The date? Operating for approximately 3 years, part of 2019 ARPO Takedown context. The target? Patients and drug diversion networks in Tennessee. The conspirator? A high-volume nurse practitioner, unnamed in records. The location? Tennessee, Appalachian Opioid Crisis Enforcement Zone. The story of the high-volume Tennessee nurse practitioner, another key figure exposed in the Appalachian Regional Prescription Opioid ARPO strike force, is a numerical horror story. This is not about exotic fraud schemes or personal predation. It is about the cold, quantifiable destruction caused by pure volume. In a state like Tennessee, which ranked high in per capita opioid prescription rates, this NP operated as a single, devastating source, transforming the controlled substance mandate into a veritable floodgate of addiction. The NP's operation was built on the terrifying premise that volume justifies itself, a perverse manipulation of the authority to prescribe. The core conflict was the sheer scale of the drug diversion. In approximately 3 years, this single nurse practitioner prescribed a terrifying arsenal of addicted drugs. Over 500,000 hydrocodone kills, approximately 300,000 oxycodone pills, approximately 300,000 benzodiazepine pills, mostly alprazolam. This total of over 1.1 million pills prescribed by one individual in one location represents a cataclysmic failure of oversight and a profound abuse of professional license. This level of dispensing is inconsistent with any legitimate medical practice and points directly to a criminal conspiracy to unlawfully distribute controlled substances. The sheer amount of pills in this one case illustrates the terrifying power of one corrupted medical professional to fuel an entire regional epidemic. The negativity bias here rests entirely on the scale of the operation. While one illegitimate prescription can be dismissed as an error, over 1 million pills over 3 years is undeniable proof of a pill mill run by someone who chose profit over the primary medical injunction, do no harm. The fallout from this case is deeply embedded in the region's ongoing fight against the opioid crisis, serving as a landmark example in federal prosecutions aimed at dismantling the pipeline of prescription-fueled addiction. The Tennessee NP pushed over 1 million pills to the street. But sometimes the corruption is institutional, involving multiple players, doctors, pharmacists, and nurse practitioners, all operating under one roof to create a prescription factory. Our next case involves the highest prescribing doctor in Ohio and the staff who helped him dispense 1.75 million pills in just 2 years. Next, we confront the terrifying efficiency of the Ohio pill mill nurse practitioners. Number 2. Ohio pill mill nurse practitioners, the Dayton Prescription Factory. The date: October 2015 to October 2017. The target: patients in Dayton, Ohio and surrounding areas. The conspirators: nurse practitioners, pharmacists, and a doctor. The location: Dayton, Ohio. The story of the Dayton, Ohio pill mill is not defined by a single predator, but by the institutionalization of illegality. This was a concerted effort by licensed professionals, including pharmacists and nurse practitioners, to leverage the authority of the highest prescribing doctor in the state to create a prescription factory that devastated the community. This case, also part of the ARPO takedown, perfectly showcases how the abuse of authority can become a self-sustaining system of crime. The doctor's license provided the authority bias, and the supporting staff, including nurse practitioners, provided the necessary logistical coverage. The core conflict was the cynical manipulation of the prescription process itself. Between October 2015 and 2017, the affiliated pharmacy alone dispensed over 1.75 million opioid pills. This number, issued primarily for no legitimate medical purpose, solidifies the facility's designation as a notorious pill mill. The nurse practitioners involved were charged for their role in facilitating this massive distribution, operating under a system designed to maximize the volume of prescriptions signed and filled, often with minimal to zero legitimate patient interaction. The negativity bias in this case was focused on the system's failure to stop the operation sooner. The community knew the facility was a revolving door for drug seekers. The federal investigation, however, finally provided the revelation that the corruption ran from the top prescribing physician down to the staff who executed the prescriptions and the pharmacists who filled them. The fallout provided crucial evidence in the fight against systemic opioid fraud, demonstrating that both the prescribers and the dispensers in a clinic must be held equally accountable for turning a medical practice into a criminal enterprise. The Dayton mill flooded the streets with over 1 million pills. But what happens when the professional doesn't even bother to examine the patient, instead trusting staff to fill out prescriptions signed completely in advance? Our final case involves a massive breach of trust, where blank, pre-signed prescription pads were left for staff, including nurse practitioners, to dispense powerful Schedule II drugs to patients the doctor never saw. This is the ultimate, final frontier of negligent authority. Next, we expose the chilling history of the Kentucky pre-signed prescription nurse practitioner. Number 1. Kentucky pre-signed prescription nurse practitioner. The ghost signature. The date? Operating as early as 2012, convictions and sentencings 2021 to 2023. The target? Patients and federal healthcare programs in Kentucky. The conspirators? Physician Jeffrey Pamble, nurse practitioner Mark Dyer, and other staff. The location? Western District of Kentucky. The case of the Kentucky pre-signed prescription fraud represents the absolute zenith of corrupted professional authority, a deliberate attempt to use a doctor's signature to circumvent the law and profit from addiction. This practice wasn't just negligent, it was a criminal conspiracy that utilized the doctor's absence as
an opportunity for nurse practitioners and other staff to act as unchecked dispensers of controlled substances. The final betrayal was turning the sanctity of the prescription pad into a mere tool of convenience and fraud. This operation, centered around physician Jeffrey Campbell and nurse practitioner Mark Dyer, was highly sophisticated, involving not only illegal distribution, but also healthcare fraud and money laundering. The core conflict was the use of pre-signed blank prescriptions. The evidence presented showed that Campbell and other providers often signed prescriptions without reviewing charts or examining patients. Specifically, other nurse practitioners, including Dyer, were given free access to Campbell's pre-signed prescription pad and issued controlled substances, including Schedule II drugs, when the physician was out of the office. This scheme enabled the providers to prescribe high volumes and dangerous combinations of drugs, including the deadly mix of an opioid, a benzodiazepine, and a muscle relaxer, known on the streets as the Holy Trinity. This combination is lethal and medically unjustified in almost all cases.
Furthermore, they were found guilty of healthcare fraud for illegally billing therapy services and soliciting kickbacks for laboratory referrals. The revelation came from local pharmacists who noticed concerning trends, specifically running out of oxycodone due to the sheer volume prescribed to patients from this practice. The investigation revealed that Campbell and Dyer ignored multiple red flags, choosing to prioritize profit. In 2021, the jury convicted both Campbell and Dyer of conspiracy to unlawfully distribute controlled substances, healthcare fraud, and money laundering. Dyer, the nurse practitioner, was sentenced to 60 months, 5 years in federal prison, a conviction that clearly demonstrated the legal system's view. Participating in the ghost signature scheme was an act of criminal distribution. The fallout is a final, urgent lesson. The authority granted by a medical license is not transferable. When a nurse practitioner uses a pre-signed blank prescription, they are not practicing medicine. They are participating in a conspiracy to traffic drugs. This case forever changed the legal scrutiny applied to collaborative medical practices in the Appalachian region. This leads us to the most infamous name in modern nursing horror, a man whose evil was so profound they had to write a law just to try and stop the next one. Honorable mention 2, Lauren Hornbuckle, the morphine switch. The terrifying reality of medical crime is that it often exploits our greatest vulnerabilities. But while the massive fraud takedowns expose billions in theft, sometimes the betrayal is intensely personal, taking place not in a digital spreadsheet, but directly in the life-saving supply chain of the hospital. Lauren Hornbuckle, a 36-year-old healthcare professional in Seminole, Florida, serves as a stark reminder of the corrosive nature of internal diversion. Her story was revealed not as a headline unto itself, but as a chilling footnote in the colossal June 2025 National Healthcare Fraud Takedown, the same operation that exposed $14.6 billion in intended loss. Hornbuckle's actions brought the vast abstract crime wave down to a single deadly threat: the tampering of medication. The official charge was one count of tampering with a consumer product in connection with unlawfully acquiring and tampering with morphine at a hospital. The core conflict was a profound breach of trust. Morphine is a Schedule II controlled substance necessary for severe pain management, but also highly addictive and prone to diversion. Hornbuckle allegedly accessed the medication and, in a terrifying act of substitution, diverted the morphine for her own use, replacing the potent painkiller with a saline solution or some other innocuous substance. This practice, known as drug diversion by substitution, is lethal. It means the patient in agonizing pain who desperately needed the morphine received nothing but an inert liquid. The physical agony and the risk of catastrophic medical events like a pain-induced shock become the collateral damage of one nurse's addiction. This silent crime leverages the ultimate authority bias. Who would ever question a syringe delivered by a nurse in a white coat? Her federal prosecution, spearheaded by Assistant U.S. Attorney Greg Pizzo, ensures this case will serve as a legal benchmark, proving that the Justice Department will vigorously pursue not just the architects of billion-dollar fraud, but the individuals who endanger patients by compromising the integrity of the medical supply chain. The ongoing status of the case keeps the open loop active. The ultimate price she will pay for compromising patient safety remains unresolved. Lauren Hornbuckle's betrayal was about a tampered syringe. But sometimes the betrayal is far larger, involving dozens of lives and exposing a fundamental systemic failure in the entire healthcare hiring process. This leads us to the most infamous name in modern nursing horror,
a man whose evil was so profound they had to write a law just to try and stop the next one. Honorable Mention 1. Charles Edmund Cullen, the original Good Nurse Killer. The name Charles Edmund Cullen does not belong on a simple list of criminals. It belongs in the history books of medical malpractice and institutional failure. Cullen was the original monster in the white coat, a registered nurse whose 15-year career was a silent, sprawling trail of death across 10 different medical institutions in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. His story is the foundation of our entire discussion, the ultimate study in how institutional complacency can enable a serial killer. Cullen's years of operation, spanning from 1988 to 2003, were defined by a deadly pattern, killing patients with undetectable overdoses of common drugs. His primary weapons were insulin, which causes fatal hypoglycemia, and digoxin, a heart medication which is lethal in high doses. He admitted to killing dozens of patients, but investigators believe his true victim count may stretch into the hundreds. The chilling central question of the Cullen saga is not why he killed, but why he was never stopped. The answer is a damning indictment of the healthcare system. Every facility he left was aware of his suspicious activity: contaminated IV bags, unexplained patient deaths, questionable conduct, but they chose to fire him quietly, allowing him to resign, often with a clean record, rather than face a wrongful discharge lawsuit. This pervasive culture of silence, driven by fear of litigation, provided the perfect cover for a serial killer to simply hop institutions and continue his spree. The authority bias of the nursing title, combined with a negativity bias that protects employers, allowed Cullen to exploit the vulnerability of the sick for over a decade. He only stopped when his conscience-stricken coworker, Amy Luckran, worked with law enforcement to secure the final, irrefutable evidence. The fallout from his 2003 arrest was immediate and legislative. His actions led directly to the 2005 New Jersey Healthcare Professional Responsibility and Reporting Enhancement Act, widely known as the Cullen Law. This law was a profound transformation of institutional liability, requiring healthcare entities to report employee misconduct, incompetence, or impairment that adversely affects patient care to the Division of Consumer Affairs. It also mandated that employers hiring healthcare workers must inquire about a history of disciplinary actions from previous facilities. The Cullen Law was an official acknowledgement that the system was complicit in enabling a serial killer. The fact that his methods, specifically the use of insulin overdoses and job hopping, were eerily mirrored by Heather Pressdee decades later, confirms that legislative change is often not enough. This systemic failure to protect the most vulnerable is the dark thread that connects Cullen's terrifying past to the predators of today. The tragic recurring lesson is not just about the criminals, but about the institutional failures that empowered them. The healthcare system, built on absolute authority bias, often struggles to look past the white coat, the license, or the digital interface to recognize the pure evil underneath. They preyed on the sick, they exploited the addicted, and they stole billions from the system, proving that the most dangerous weapon in America is often a prescription pad in the hands of a predator. Could these betrayals have been prevented? What does the sheer scale of the $14.6 billion fraud tell us about the current state of oversight? The answer demands rigorous self-examination and a fundamental change in how we license, monitor, and ultimately trust those who hold the power of life and death in their hands. What is your reaction to the volume of pills prescribed by a single, unchecked medical professional? Comment below and let us know where you are watching from. And if you want to understand the dark history behind these crimes, hit subscribe for more true crime documentaries.